Recording in progress.
Buonasera a tutti. Buonasera dal
Good evening, everyone from the Cittaslow International Headquarters in Orvieto. Welcome to this webinar that is dedicated to agrobiology and to the world of bees. Not only this, but also to the manifesto Cittaslow Bees and to the actions that the various cities undertake to protect bees. During their lifespan, they transport pollen, and these insects must be protected for our life, for the life of our planet, and to ensure our future. The bee is a biological indicator. We will talk about it during this afternoon, and it's the indicator of the health of our environment. Cittaslow Bees is a manifesto that we have produced with other countries in 31 countries in order to finalize the behavior of our cities to protect bees. And in order to raise awareness with concrete actions, because as you know, Cittaslow has visions, philosophies, ideas, but is committed to take proactive actions, projects in communities, educate and protect the bees. I would like to greet our president of Cittaslow International, Mauro Migliorini, who will introduce the works. I would like to greet the other speakers, Mr. Pier Paolo Danieli of the University of Tuscia of Viterbo for Agricultural and Forestry Sciences, and Professor Mutinelli Franco, who is Director of the Experimental Center of Veterinary Medicine of the Experimental Zooprofilattico Institute of the Venezie. We will conclude with a concrete experience. A producer will tell its history. We will have their direct experience in the beekeeping and in the sustainability sector. So I would like to give the floor to Mr. Migliorini. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here to this webinar and lead this session together with Mr. Danieli and Mr. Mutinelli. I would like to thank them for having accepted our invitation. Our invitation started, as Mr. Olivetti said, 1 month ago. 1 month ago, our international committee shared an idea which was very simple. At the end of May, within very few days, the UN reminded of 2 fundamental days for our environment, namely the Day for Bees and Day for Biodiversity, without thinking about what we have celebrated what we have celebrated some days ago, namely the Day for Environment. What can we do to protect bees and biodiversity? Because we hear about biodiversity, of protecting biodiversity, protecting the environment, and this means protecting our health, to protect our landscape, our history, and provide a future to future generations. This means trying to improve the agriculture and breedings. It means promoting the production of honeys that in some areas, also in our nation, in Europe, and in the third world, in addition of being fundamental, it is also a source of income. Some people live from the production of honey. In Italy, Italy is one of the first 6 countries for the production of honey, and this is a fundamental information to bear in mind. Bees and all pollinating insects, and also butterflies and other pollinating insects, wild insects, are absolutely fundamental for keeping biodiversity. They are fundamental for the production of our food. I'm reading an information. It was calculated that only in Europe, 84% of 264 bred species needs pollinating from insects. And the vegetables reproduce themselves thanks to the action of pollinating insects and bees. These are information, this is pieces of information that led us to say, what can we do in concrete terms? What are the good practices in order to support environment, biodiversity, bees, and the production of honey? Our philosophy is very simple. We try to do concrete actions and to propose other actions that can be reproduced in all the cities of the world. That's why we have proposed a manifesto, Cittaslow Bees, which was supported also by the new Ministry of the Ecological Transition. There are simple rules and actions that are aimed to the citizens and local administrations. And they are directed as well as to the associations of farmers. These are simple actions that during this month led to focus the attention both in Italy and in Europe and in the other countries of our association to this topic, namely those administrations that decided to replace some flowers or plants that were not autochthonous with other autochthonous plants. Or some administrations gave school children seeds of autochthonous flowers, or other administrations provided citizens with other autochthonous seeds, because we want to help the survival of bees and we want to help the production of local honeys. Survival of bees means to plant seeds that are rich in substances for bees that need them for their life during the autumn and winter seasons. We want to support also the circular economy that starts from the production of honey. That's why we have prepared a list for the local administration by indicated the seeding of native plants along the streets or in the parks, the provision of areas in order to install apiaries. This is also happening. We are doing it also in Asolo, in the province of Treviso. We have some territories in the hill areas, and we are providing them to the farmers. In addition, there is the respect of phytosanitary protocols. We have to respect the local, regional standards, but as mayor, I decided not to use specific herbicides that are dangerous for insects. For the maintenance of cemeteries, of streets, of access paths to our monuments. We will have more plants, but this is natural. We don't have to kill all the insects. The cooperation with the local association of beekeepers and farmers, because it is important to educate people who work in this sector to protect the environment and the biodiversity. We will organize training courses for the citizens. We will organize strolls during the seasons, and we will provide courses in the schools. We are suggesting citizens to create gardens that can be a place where bees can do their work, so we can plant specific vegetables or plants that bees can use. The vegetables attract insects and bees, and we have prepared a specific list by drawing the attention also to the various seasonality of plants, because this guarantees flowers during a specific part of the year that provide nourishing to the insects. So we have to create small habitats in citizens by breeding and cultivating plants that help them not to extinguish. And we also suggest to nourish in this way bees. So these are simple actions, but they are essential because we are convinced, and it is interesting that the mayors are interested in this aspect. This is what we are trying to promote, because bees is the queen of biodiversity. That's why it was important to celebrate the World Day of Bees and the World Day of Biodiversity. The Ministry of Ecological Transition supported all the initiatives from May 2021 to May 2022, 1 year work for raising awareness in order to help these insects that are governed by their rules. They produce nectar, they collect pollen, they transport water, and they fly 1 kilometer to do this. The bees can keep particles of various kind. We have provided also suggestions and indications to farmers by saying, for instance, when you prepare your territories for sowing, try not to keep the roadsides, but also keep the bushes, because they are a way for bees to recover. They can produce flowers. Let's try to vary the production of our territory in a cyclic way. This is a strong message against monocrops. Let's say this from Asolo, where there is a Prosecco. Not only the Prosecco from Asolo, but also the one of Valdobbiadene. They are focused their attention to the protection of the environment. They are educating their farmers for using correctly the substances to combat the illnesses of vineyards. They are preparing a lot of training courses to protect the insects and the pollinating insects in general, not only the bees. So I am optimistic from this point of view for the new generation, because the attention for the environmental issues is very strong. And I want to reiterate that we have prepared this manifesto for bees, for environment, but also for honey producers. Every area of our state, of our nation, but also of other nations in the world, has honey productions that are autochthonous. They are very particular with organoleptic characteristics that change according to the area, because the acacia honey is different from other acacia's honey in other areas of our territory. Bees suffered from illnesses that kill them, and they are suffering from them. That's why we want to collaborate with the research institutions, the zooprophylactic institutions, in order to make synergies together with you and together with other associations such as Coldiretti, in order to help this small insect that continues to work 24 hours a day to provide us with food and to allow pollinating and to give us this beautiful environment. Finally, before leaving the floor to Mr. Danieli and Mutinelli, Keeping biodiversity means also to fight against climate change, and it means limiting the spread of parasites and other illnesses. But in the environment must be populated with plants that must be diverse, and this diverse is maintained thanks to pollinating insects such as bees. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. President. You have heard a mayor that urges other mayors, other colleagues that are officials for our environment, and he wants to support this commitment. And they want to provide and to suggest other administrations for taking actions. We will support the manifesto with the commitment of all the communities of Cittaslow, but also with the scientific pool that can bring us forward. So I would like to ask to Mr. Danieli, how is the health of bees?
Thank you for the invitation. Thanks to all of you. Of course, the topic is very wide and complex, so somehow I will be too simplistic in my presentation. You should see the slides. I am Paolo Danieli. I'm a professor at the Department of Forest and Agriculture Sciences at the Agriculture faculty. I see with appreciation the fact that a representative of like the major of Asolo and other, with as many other majors and other competent players at territorial level have this competence regarding the many issues that regard bees, but also as a reflection also beekeepers, and as the major said, also agriculture in a more wider sense. I start with this image that is not so updated, but it shows as in the last 20 years why it is, the question is about loss of bees. This is a global issue, of course, and already at the beginning of this century, we have had multiple statistical analyses that have shown that regarding the various areas, the loss of beehives that was reported by the beekeepers as assumed a scope that is really worrying. More recent data from 2006-07 until 2017 show some loss that compared to an acceptable level in gray. In gray, as you can see on the graphics, in certain years have reached very worrying levels. This is considering the insect, the bee as from an economic perspective, but also from an environmental point of view and agricultural point of view. At European level as well, we have had various studies. One that I would like to highlight is the one that shows that the loss of beehives at European level is an important factor that, however, varies on a seasonal level according to the critical point, like spring, summer, and when it is a moment that is less critical, there is a variable probability from year to year, and every season is the right moment to make an analysis of the situation of bees and the correlated activities. Of that study, I would like to highlight some factors, and I would like to talk about that in an easy way. In particular, the factors that were analyzed in that study were the problems, the issues that were reported by the beekeepers in terms of effects on the queen bees, and the work that in the sector was done on the main issue from a biological point of view, that is the aggression of the parasite. And then the type of cultures, the main cultures in the landscape, like corn. In a more reduced scale, the situation as a reflection, is reflected by the national situation. This is a smaller study that we have conducted with some beekeepers in Valcomino area, 2013 and 14. You see 3 of those beekeepers have reported some variable losses from 15% to 60%. In that case, we could have had some intoxication problem. We have asked them what could be the causes, and they promptly have told about the queen bees and the parasites and the colonies that show themselves to be very low active, less active, and less able to carry out the activities required by a colony. The health of bees is to be read on a multi-year scale, but also on a yearly scale or monthly scale, with a calendar that reflects what happens in the beehive, but also outside it. So if at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, the bigger issues are the ones regarding adversities for bees, or the loss, the lack of reserves and resources in the main season, when the agricultural activity increases with the sowing and preparation of the land. So in this period, we have an issue that is more relevant and has an impact. And we have different factors that change. And if we want to answer the question of Olivetti, they are subject to factors that threat their health. Biological factor are many, So this slide is rather limited and regard the parasites. And there is a list that is non-complete of organic origin. They are bacterial and fungal origin and viral origin, and they are very complex. Then we have all of the other aspects that are not strictly linked with the bee and interaction with other pathogens and parasites, and they are climate changes we are experiencing over the last years. A dramatic situation as in our territory. We have divergence from the seasonal weather conditions that we were used to and in more intense phenomena, and this causes a misalignment of the phenomenology of the beehive during the seasonalities and then the external situation like temperature, humidity, and blossoming that, as said by the previous speaker, they are the food of bees. Then we have pollution, 360 degrees. So the most crucial cause is the use of chemicals and also pollutants of the urban areas, industrialized areas. They are surely polluting. Then we have the practices of the beekeepers that can add to bees further issues. Then we have the management of the environment, the loss of biodiversity with cultures that are intensive or monocultures. All of these are aspects that reduce drastically the availability of resources for bees and the possibility to reach in short distance blossoms. So we have a very complex context, and we have also the practices of the beekeeper, of the farmers. Those practices can cause stress to the beehive. Let's think about visits that are too frequent, or moving the beehive to from place to place to reach some blossomings, some plants. This is a fragmentation of the habitat. But we also have the issue of the trend of the beekeepers to select lines of bees that satisfy better the requirements of management and production. And this is not meaning that these represent the best condition to allow the bees to adapt themselves to the landscape that is changing and is highly stressing. All of that it is not documented as consistently and is reported as a colony collapse disorder, a depopulation of beehive as translated into Italian, and this represents a moment of verification of an issue that goes over the limits of tolerance for the colony. So when the bees suddenly abandon or the beehive or they disappear, so the beekeeper opens the beehive and doesn't find anything. So this is a less spread situation and represents the health status of these bees. I will show you briefly the organic aspects. So beekeepers know very well about the varroa, the structure that lives at expenses of the bees in its younger stage, and then also when the bee is adult. This presence is unfortunately has some characteristics of development that are exponential. If the problem is not managed at the beginning, and it has development that is exponential, and very rapidly this leads to serious issues for the hive and even to collapse. So we have a lesser longevity of the bees that are smaller and are less able to fly, less able to collect the food for the hive, and dramatic situations that are evident when you see in a hive bees that have deformed, malformed flies, and dishomogeneity and swarming that are not homogeneous, and then problems with the queens, with the replacement that is too frequent. And in this case, the queen is not able to be replaced in the right way. All of that, all of those factors can lead to the loss of the hive at the end of the year or during the winter season if the problem is not managed in the right way and in the right timing. There are various strategies that can be adopted against the varroa and compared to other biological problems. The main weapon and is the use of acaricides. They represent a reference to test the quality of other solutions in case you want to use other products. They are drugs in any aspect, so they have a very high efficiency. They are easy to be used, but of course, as any drug, they present also cons, and considering the organic value of the bee and the characteristics that are linked to honey, the accumulation of those substances within the hive and sometimes also in the product surely represent some crucial problems. But there are also other problems, like the fact that acting on the parasite, those substances remain for longer time, and this is accumulated in the product. So their activity is causing problems to bees, like regarding the ripening, the sexual ripening. If you look at the queen, that is the focal point of the hive, that every beekeeper is appreciate as the main element. I would like to show you some studies that in the past have shown that queens that are that grow in an environment. After the coupling with the males, they lose the quantity of sperm, and this is very strong. And in case of exposition to those drugs. So we have some natural tools that can be used, like formic acid, and recently we have started to use another substance, and they are natural substances like hope, and if they are used in the right way, some of them, like formic acid, they fight against the varroa in the initial stage and in the adult stage, and during the reproduction that takes place during the reproductive stage. We do not have evidence of accumulation and nor of phenomena or adaptation of the varroa to those substances. So we have extraction of hop, extracts of hop that can be used, and we are testing if they are effective enough. I summarize here the various substances that are used, like dropping or vaporization. What do the beekeeper think about these two approaches? A study of 2020 shows that through a survey submitted to the beekeepers, they had to express their appreciation from 2 to 5. And if you look at the comparison, general comparison, we see that the beekeepers prefer the use of natural substances. You should consider that we had various kind of beekeepers, professional, hobbyists, and sideliners. The three categories have stressed the importance of the effect on the parasite, the impact that the substance can have on the bees, and on the quality and quantity of the product. There are other methods to fight against this parasite. Yes, of course, some of them have become a standard, like the use of the of the grid below the height, or we give the queens the possibility to reproduce, and we have other aspects like the use of sugar or hypothermic methods that are not so spread because of the investment that they require. With a system of heating that is not damaging bees, then we have other methods like manipulation of the dimensions of the cells or spaces, management of spaces within hives. They could be considered as innovative methods. They are being tested and
sembra si possa somministrare direttamente le api attraverso l'alimento e da qui possa raggiungere la varroa e danneggiarla, o l'utilizzo di sali.
We also have the use of minerals like copper and iron that, according to some studies, can bring benefits for against the parasite. Then there is the aspect related to the selection of bees in terms of apiary or in terms of keeping of the queens, like selecting genetic lines in terms of grooming activity, hygienic activity, cleaning of the bees, identifying in the sisters that are sick and the VSHBs that have these characteristics against the parasite. The other subject that is important for the dramatic situation for the bees from a biological point of view is the nosema that has characteristics similar to fungi and has very particular characteristic, and together with the varroa is considered as an important agent in terms of collapse of the hive and in terms of non-collapsing of the hive. Compared to the varroa, the main problem is that the nosema, it cannot be seen until the family has evidence, like we have diagnostic symptoms that can induce the beekeeper to ask himself or herself if something is not going well, like for the or signs that you can find in the colony and the fact that the colony is not producing as expected, like in spring or in autumn. In this case, the main activity of the nosema against the bees, apart from other aspects, is the reduced capacity to absorb nutrients. And this is due to the fact that it damages the intestine and this causes oxidative stress and the alteration of the organs, with the possibility with reduction of possibilities for the bee, as they are reproductive animals. In general, we have nutritional stress of the entire colony in the early stage and then adult stage, reduction of the production and the depopulation, gradual depopulation or the collapse or death of the hive. Nutrition is very important. It's really, I really appreciated that the major has spoken about that. I'm not a professor of nutrition for animals, but I think that nutrition is a very important aspect and is sometimes neglected or not appreciated in the right way. So these insects have a nutrition that is not managed by the beekeeper. Indeed, the beekeeper leaves the bees to manage them themselves in order not to increase the costs. And the production of pollen is crucial for bees. And in the summer, you see to the right some graphics that are related to a study that we have conducted in Viterbo. You can see that in the summer, there is a reduction of the production of pollen, and the nutritional potential is very reduced compared to spring and autumn. Another important aspect that has to be considered is the fact that the various adversities interact with the hive and the colony that could be compromised by other factors, like, for example, pollution, environmental pollution, or of chemicals. In this case, in this study, it's interesting to see how the spread of nosema has increased increases in case the bee is exposed to a substance that is thiacloprid. So the bees are more damaged, are less healthy compared to bees that are just exposed to the pathogen. As I said, with nosemosis, beekeepers have not much tools available because we do not have specific drugs available at European level. But as the nosema is linked to the nutritional aspects of the hive, we have some methods and substances that consider the fact that bees need nutrition during the years. And we have some formulas, various plant extracts that can have interesting results in terms of number of bees that the beekeeper found in the hive, and they have the nosema in terms of spores. They are easy to be used, but you have to consider the context because there are many factors that can make less effective those methods. If you want to find first point of closure of this first presentation, we have some strategies that the beekeeper presumably should face in order to solve the multiple issues. The adaptive approach, that is not to imagine that from now until the next 10 years, the operational aspects will not change because we are experimenting various methods year after years, as I have already mentioned. an higher level of integration of experience, knowledge, and self-learning regarding the issues that we are experiencing and that the beekeepers will experience later, and to manage the hives with an integrated approach, trying to exploit various methods that the market puts at disposal. An important aspect at hive level and selection of bees, we could have resilient lines or adaptable lines that can adapt themselves to the landscape at sub-regional and local level. Yes, we should conclude rapidly. And then technological methods like precision beekeeping. We are talking about technological solutions that very soon could represent a realistic solution. And for the beekeeper, means to measure various aspects about the hive, the weight of the hive, the queen, the accumulation of resources or other aspects that can be analyzed through the sound that is produced by the bees. Of course, the presentation aimed at talking about the problem of the bee health at 360 degrees. This is a very complex issue. We can have green policies that can help working in a coordinated way between beekeepers and research and territorial authorities. And we hope that new technologies could help the beekeepers to have higher awareness of their bees in order to plan in an adaptive way interventions that are needed. I thank you for the attention and sorry for having been so long. Thank you.
Danieli, una relazione veramente, ovviamente dovuto
Danieli, of course.
Il problema che ha illustrato è veramente complesso, ci ha fatto vedere proprio il range della complessità del problema, ma ci ha dato anche degli stimoli e delle indicazioni preziose.
You provided us with suggestions saying that there could be solutions, and this will be the topic of next meetings. Thank you. So I would like to leave the floor to Mr. Mutinelli. The title of its presentation is how the bee can be an environmental indicator. Mr. Mutinelli, as we said before, is responsible for the Experimental Zooprofilattico Institute of Venezie. Thank you to the organizers for the invitation and the opportunity to speak about a topic which is in line with the approach and the introduction that have been made by the president of Cittaslow. We will consider bees from a different point of view with respect to what has been shown by Professor Danieli, because in this case, we can see this insect with its behavioral and morphological characteristics as a tool that can provide humans important information for the environment and for improving the management of the environment in which bees find themselves, and an environment which is shared with other animal species and by humans. I try to summarize the main characteristics linked to the morphology and behavior of bees that make them an important and reliable indicator for the environment, which is used as a biomonitoring tool by using a living organism, namely an insect. Bees and other insects were mentioned in the introduction, and we find some elements here that explain why bees prevail over other insects in this function or for this use. So the easiness in which they are bred. So we are speaking about bred bees in this case. They are ubiquitous organisms, and in normal conditions, maybe not nowadays, but in normal conditions, bees are self-sufficient to provide themselves with food. They have a body structure, namely the hairs, that is particularly suitable to hold the materials and substances that they come in contact with. The typical example is when we see bees covered by pollen. So this is a double function of the pollinating insect. They are useful for crops, but also for pollinating substances, and they provide to the hive this important element, namely pollen. They are very sensitive to the exposure and to the plant protection products. So we are speaking about pesticides. And another characteristic is that they have an intense life, especially in the active season, but also it is very short. So there is a very rapid regeneration of bees within the populations. We have newer and newer populations that are keen to play their activities, and they monitor the environment. They have a great mobility, and a hive covers an area of 7 square kilometers. They are very efficient in monitoring the territory. In one day, a worker bee performs 100 visits to flowers. If we think about the quantity of bees within a beehive by taking into consideration the separation of activities, so they do not all of them visit flowers, we can say that there are 10,000 worker bees, and we can see how many microsamplings that the bees can perform. For those who are not experts, This is an apiary where there is a series of beehives that contain colonies of bees with respective populations, and we can see their activities in the pictures. The flying activity characterizes this insect, and thanks to this activity, we can use or exploit bees as a source of information for the environment in which they find themselves. A colony of bees has a queen, which is in the middle of the picture, that manages and coordinates her family that can reach in an active season to 40 or 50,000 subjects. This is a picture of how many bees that are present. This is an indication of their activity, continuous activity. The morphology is suitable to collect information that we can collect from the territory, and thanks to the visiting activity to the flowers and to the collection of nectar or of pollen, because the contact with the pollen in flowers allows the flower to have the pollen be in contact with the surface of the body of the bees. So they can also collect resins on the various leaves. This is collected within the honeycomb and becomes the bread for bees. Then we can see honey and water, which is very important for the hive. All these elements can be collected by the bees and become indirectly elements that allow the bees to act as a biological indicator and an indicator to monitor the territory. I wanted to include this picture of Professor Celli and collaborators. For the first time, they focused their attention to the environmental monitoring action of bees, because we can see that starting from the possible polluting sources that impact the air, soil, and water, and that impact plants and animals, all of them can be interpreted as elements that lead to our hive. When bees, during their daily activity of visiting the territory, searching for sources for nectar or pollen, can transport through their body, and they can transport possible sources of pollution. I included various images from a study made by experts from the University of Bologna who drew their attention on the role of bees. Both the bees, but also the bee products. It was confirmed that these could be a monitoring station, which is made up of 2 beehives that are managed according to the good practice, but they are also provided with baskets that collect the dead bees that are eliminated from the beehive and represent a very important element because these cages, these traps, are realized so that they can be eliminated by other animals. So the object, the information we collect is reliable. The monitoring protocols involve the study of pesticides, heavy metals, and radionuclides. Other matrices were also included over time. A mortality rate has been established, namely 250 dead bees per week per station.
Delle api. E poi a seconda appunto del principio
according to the active principle that is searched for, we can indicate the various matrices of the beehive. We have already mentioned pesticides. They are considered an important threat for the survival of insects and for the good health of bees. And they can be used to evaluate the presence of pesticides in the environment according to the characteristics of the territory, not only in cases of acute events of mortality of bees, but also to know what is the environmental situation regarding these substances. This is important to establish a biomonitoring plan. We have to define the areas of interest, the aim of our monitoring, and we have to know the territory and the use of the territory. We can consider, in the light of the monitoring, whether the bees can be a direct indicator, so they are affected directly by the presence of pesticides in the environment, or they can have an indirect role if they are not drastically hit or affected by the pesticides, but they can transport pesticides that accumulate in the bee products and provide an indirect indication relating to the presence of pesticides in the environment. This is a graph relating to some studies of the study group of the Bologna University that recorded in the province of Bologna over the year the presence of pesticides and these graphs take into account the period in which pesticides are used for agricultural purposes. The spring time is for sure the period in which pesticides are used the most, which is the most critical for bees because there are episodes of acute mortality. Another element which is a subject of biomonitoring relates to heavy metals, especially lead and cadmium, but the list of heavy metals expanded. They were monitored through the bees. We have to consider the anthropic activities, the industrial activities, but also urbanization of the territory that are possible sources of heavy metals. And we have also to consider the characteristics of the territory of the soil, because in the case of lead, the presence of this element also in honey could be linked to natural characteristics of the soil. According to other studies, these experts considered the presence of heavy metal, lead, nickel, but also cadmium, and they considered the presence on the body of bees in red, on the surface of the body in yellow, and in green there are the quantity. There is the quantity of heavy metals both in the body and on the surface. There is also a separation between the urban areas, industrial areas, and natural areas. And this shows the various differences existing with regard to the heavy metals detected. We can notice that in the urban areas and industrial areas, the highest quantity of lead was detected on the bee body. And this is more true with respect to the natural area. So the exposure was less intense. With regard to the radionuclides, we can refer to the Chernobyl event. And after that event, also in Italy, honey and wax and pollen were used to detect the presence of cesium-137. And after that, there was another incident in the south of Spain after the moving of air currents. This allowed to detect the effects of this event by using the monitoring stations. There are some examples of monitoring activity that we have performed in Veneto in 2004. This is an activity performed in the regional reserve of Colli Euganei. The attention was drawn to pesticides, heavy metals, and benzene because it was the period of transition to the green benzene. So the attention was drawn on an element which was present. The apiaries were located within the regional reserve. We didn't have any detection of benzene or pesticides. There were no mortality events, and the dead bees did not contain pesticides, but we have detected the presence of heavy metals in line with the national data, namely a very limited presence of cadmium and a stronger presence of lead. This is another survey and another study performed in the Vicenza province. The attention was drawn to the pesticides for agricultural use and for the presence of heavy metals, lead and cadmium. And we have extended this study to other hydrocarbons and to the PCBs. This study provided us with interesting data, both with regard to the pesticides linked to the cases of the territory and some other information with regard to the possible presence of PAH and PCBs. In this case, our study was based on beeswax pollen. Similarly, in 2007, a study was carried out for biomonitoring, not only with bees, because the attention was drawn, considering the territory, also to the marine environment. There were also fish in the study, and we continue to have honeybee wax pollen as a subject for investigation, and we have drawn our attention on pesticides, heavy metals, and PCBs and PAH. We have always drawn the attention on these elements, but in another study, we have examined the ultrafine particulate deriving from transportation means, and the attention was drawn to the bees and the beehive products. We are in the north of Italy. The presence of this particulate was associated to traffic of cars and other vehicles. There were some elements that are part of the braking system of the vehicles, and they are a source of environmental pollution. And also in this case, we have provided with a graph. This shows that the bees in their activity can fly in contaminated areas and contaminate themselves and convey the pollution to their products. This is a series of images that show the ultrafine particulate that could be present on the body of the bees or on the grains of pollen. Another study of 2021 shows that another source of pollution which was brought to the general attention is the presence of plastics in our environment, not only in the sea. And this study from the Danish colleagues showed that bees can be active samplers for microplastics. The microplastics are particles with sizes ranging from 1 micron to 5 millimeters. So they are very, very small, considering also the dimensions of the bees. The most abundant is polyester, and there are series of plastics that are illustrated in the central graph that were identified on the bodies of the bees, on the wings, at the base of the wings, on the paws, and these microplastics can stay on the body of the bees that convey them also to the beehive products. Here you can see the various images with the various types of microplastics. So to conclude, we can see that we can go back to our initial image, namely the bees that fly. So we have to underline the role that the bees have during pollution, during the pollinating activity, both for crops and for spontaneous plants. So they play a fundamental role for maintaining the ecosystem. And they have also a role as an animal that produce food such as honey, but also other products such as wax. Having these two roles, pollinating insects and producer, they have also a biomonitoring role that they can play, namely they monitor the environment by collecting possible substances. The bees accumulate these substances on their body, and they deposit them at their products, and they can provide us with important information on the presence of pollutants and of the health status of the environment, which we share with the bees. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mutinelli. It was very interesting. This provided us with new perspectives. So the bees are also a monitoring agents for our environment. I would like to remind you that all the documents of the entire week of Cittaslow Academy 2021 will be available on a dedicated folder on our website. So let's hear the last speech. So we are approaching the local aspect. We have Davide Ferretti of the Agricultural Society Casa Parrina. So he will show us his experience.
Thanks, Giorgio.
Vado da me. Buonasera a tutti, sono Davide Ferretti.
Good evening, everybody. I am the owner of Casa Parrina. I wanted to thank Cittaslow, the entire staff of the headquarters of Orvieto for the possibility given to me for the presentation that I'm going to make. I wanted to show you a video of the beauty of our company and our landscape. The history of Casa Parrina started in the 90s when my mother lost her job. She decided to invest in agriculture thanks to after a course that she attended in Orvieto, and that was organized by an association that we are still member of. Our company is in the northeast part of Orvieto, in an area that is far away from any pollution source like street or intensive agriculture. It is a place that is rich in terms of trees and is placed in the Mediterranean area. I have spoken about honey, but we differentiate our production because to invest just in one culture in this era is not so fine. So we have the production of hazelnuts with fruits. As you have seen before, we have products from the garden that we are rediscovering through also the production of jams, of medlars and prickly pears. They are offered by the land. Our environment is very rich in blossoming, but also we respect this landscape because, as you can see, the differentiation of production, wine, olive trees and autochthon plants. For example, in the olive trees garden, we have plants that various types of plants. We have various types of wine that we produce that are typical of our place, as you can see from some images that are made by us. They are qualitative, not perfect. All of this production respects the landscape. We avoid to cut too much or too frequently the meadows, because the richness in blossoms, the variety of blossoms allows us to have a final product, honey, that is very rich in minerals and is also very aromatic, because we have a variety of blossoms that we respect. As you have seen in the hazelnuts production trees, we avoid to cut the plants, and bees start their work during the spring. These are repertoire images made by us during our works of checks of their condition, and this is the usual process of collection of honey through the processing in the laboratory and centrifugation to have honey. The beauty of honey, as it has already stressed before, of bees is the fact that the humankind cannot intervene too much in their processing, so the result is a product that is very good and very natural. If we respect nature without using any pesticides or cutting plants or avoiding using chemical products, our company is a small company, is a family managed company. Each of us has his or her role. The production has never been so perfect, but this allows us to have a wide offer, and this is a reason why you have to visit us in Orvieto. Of course, we have also the economic aspect. So we are able to differentiate the offer in Orvieto. We have always had fun. As my mother said, this was an idea to use the products not just as a finished product, but also use of honey as a substitution of sugar in jams. For our, that's why our products are so appreciated, because we do not use sugar. All the production of hazelnuts, I call it this product the good Nutella, because the healthy Nutella, because it's a natural product made of honey, of cacao, cocoa, and as you see, we have always had a very wide activity in terms of fairs since the beginning of our career, and it's linked to the activity of Cittaslow in an active way. We have always considered the fact that as we are a family, we are producers. All of us are producers. Anyone who comes to us to talk or to us or to buy from us, to have the producer in front of him or her was the idea to create these relationships based on trust. as in the framework of smaller companies that are managed by at-level family. So I would like to stress the fact that also in the production, it has been mentioned many times today, sustainability. We are independent in terms of sustainability, in terms of energy, use of water. We can irrigate all of the plants through our system, and this is an advantage for us, but also a process that allows to spare 30% of water. So we are a green company in the green heart of Italy. I thank for this possibility. I thank Pier Giorgio. For me, it is a really, I'm really proud to talk about our company. Sometimes in these years, it is always the question is always about the difficulty of managing companies like ours. But activities and realities like Cittaslow that lead and give the opportunity to promote and to improve the earnings that allow us to stay in the sector of agriculture for young people like me as well. Thank you. Thank you to Davide. Thank you, Davide, to your family. We have listened to the voice of a producer, and I defend the criteria of sustainability for the products. And as he said, it has been said by our President Migliorini, we have also an impact, an aspect that is linked to an economic aspect and an environmental aspect. So of course we use our house without destroying it. So who better than Cittaslow can bring forward those ideas of resilience that are so much spoken about. So we need competencies that are really precise. So I thank all of the speakers, the president, but he is our host. He is the one who hosts us. We want to greet you, and we go on with our academy. I thank Davide, Ferretti, Franco Mutinelli, and Paolo Danieli. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. we will have an important webinar on the slow urbanist, the beauty, green, and the social rights for equality, coordinated by our responsible for the International Scientific Committee, Giuseppe Roma. Thank you for your attention. Buonasera.